Hello everybody. Today I would like to address a new topic, which is near death and out-of-body experiences. But as always, before beginning this interview, please like, comment, and share this content. It's very important for us regarding the reference point. Sorry. If you want to go deeper, of course, you will find Charles Sabourin's book, Vibrational, Psychogenetics, and if you want to go from theory to concrete to practice, please book some individual consultation with Charles. So back to our topic, near-death and out-of-body experiences. If you open a dictionary regarding what is the definition of near-death experiences, we will find this definition. It's when we have a clinical death regarding a human being and all the different experiences after this biological death. You will find a lot of experiences regarding death, regarding near-death experience or out-of-body experiences among different cultures, regarding all the different centuries. One of the very famous philosophers regarding this kind of experiences is Raymond Moody, and he said, quote, "These experiences suggests that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but something far more fundamental." Regarding all of this information, Charles, my first question will be, what is for you the near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences?
Near-death experiences are for a person who is adjusted to systemic reality, is a contact with ourselves, in other words, our person, instead of our personality. People are used to identify to their personality, which is their memories and the emotional charge in the memories. And what they don't know is that those kinds of memories are not adjusted. Those experiences, when they are very young, are not adjusted to systemic reality, and they are influenced by their environment, their parents, their culture, etc. And people identify to their personality, to that memory, or that inferior consciousness. In other words, they identify to a consciousness which is not adjusted to systemic reality. So when they live either out-of-body experience or near-death experience, they are projected into their person, and they have no experience of their person. They don't identify with their person, they identify with their personality, you see. It's still the person that identifies with the personality, but totally unconsciously. So when they live that kind of experience, they have no experience of that identity. So they live, usually they live something very peaceful, different from the pressure and the confrontation of their personality towards their person. So people suffer because of that confrontation between those two forces, you see. So the person is their consciousness, and the personality is the interpretation of the consciousness or the person of reality, you see. And they are, since they're very young, they are influenced by their environment, so they build a certain kind of identity, you see, involutive identity. So, like I said, when they're projected in their person, they live all kinds of experience. They're not dead yet, see? So the brain still functions, see? You need the brain, you need the function of the brain to live consciousness. You don't have consciousness without the brain. When the brain is dead, there's no more consciousness. See? People misinterpret that in the sense that they think that because they live something, a certain experience, when the body is inert, it's not living in the sense that the heart is stopped, but the brain continues much after, you know. So that's the kind of experience they live. See, you got to make a difference, or demystify a little bit that person that you were talking about that says that consciousness is not part of the body, because when you live that kind of experience, you're separate from the brain. You see, but it takes the brain to live that our consciousness. You see, a consciousness by itself is another thing. You see what I mean? What is consciousness? It's a capacity of observation of life. But it takes life to be able to observe life. You see? In the sense that we are living, or that we're not dead, or whatever. So when people live that kind of experience, they're not dead yet. The proof is that they come back. You see? And they interpret the whole experience through their personality, in other words, through the influence of what they don't know, or what they know. You see? So it's filtered by the memories and the emotional charge and everything. That's what they describe. When they live out of body experience, is the exact same thing. See? They touch. It's not exactly the same thing, but they touch the same. They still touch their person, in the sense that they experience their person, but without any experience of that identity. So that's why there's all kinds of interpretation. People have a very funny way of looking at consciousness, you know, as if consciousness could exist without a body. You see what I mean? It's different. Consciousness is different than the body, of course, but it can't live, it can't be without a body. See? So as long as there's activity in the brain, there's consciousness somewhere, somehow. You see? Once there's no more activity, no more brains, no more nothing, there's no more consciousness. What is left is memory, is information of the experience of that person. That's it.
Yes, because the people, you know, a lot of people who experience, you know, a near-death experience or out-of-body experience, they have been pronounced dead by the doctor and so on. This is why, you know, they rely a lot on the doctor said that I was dead, so without any, key indicator from the heart, from the brain, and so on. So it is a proof that there is a kind of consciousness out of the body. Because even the doctor, even the, him or her or whatever, told that they were actually dead. So yes.
The heart stopped. So the doctor will check if the heart is still beating. The heart is not beating, you say, well, he's dead. But the brain continues. See, the activity of the brain continues. It's not dead yet. See?
Yeah.
But the person is totally unconscious, you see, in the sense that he's not naturally conscious like we are, like he's used to be. That's the difference. So the brain still functions, there's still consciousness, so he lives an experience. And he lives an experience separated, relatively separated from his personality, his psychological identity. See? And what is psychological identity? It's the identity that was it's the influence of his environment since he's very young, and after that it's the influence of the collective that he keeps nourishing by fear of abandonment or fear of rejection or whatever. And that's the psychological identity. But the real identity is separate from that. See? Once a person adjusts, or once he awakens to systemic reality, then he starts building his person, his real identity. But it takes certain kind of experiences to be able to evolve to that. And the experience is similar to near-death experience in the sense that the person will build up a certain distance from his personality. When he starts building that distance with the personality, then he lives similar experience, but conscious. You see, he's not dead. He's not. The heart still pumps and everything, so he's conscious of what's going on. You see, so there's two realities. There's the psychological reality, and there's the systemic reality. And the problem with psychological perception is it always interprets the systemic reality. Religions are based on that, philosophies and all that. It's all intuitive interpretation, you see. They intuit something, they have the intuition of systemic reality. Everybody has that. Some are more intuitive than others, so they create the religions, you see. So because they interpret that contact. Why? Because they identify themselves to psychological consciousness or memories or a condition, a psychological condition.
And because you are speaking about, interpretation, when we study the different, experiences, near-death experience and out-of-body experience, a lot of people told us that they were facing Jesus, Buddha, or Muhammad, a lot of figures like that. So even when they go outside of their body, they are still facing some interpretation. So
of course, there's still a link with the psychological identity. you see. But they see that, when they're alive too, you know. So they still believe that. So when they die, clinically, they'll see the same thing. They'll be influenced by the same memories, you see, the same information, in other words, and the same emotional charge of that information. So that's why they interpret it, and they have about the same kind of experience. It's different for each culture, but each person too, but very similar, generally very similar. So
yeah, and we can find some differences, of course, regarding the different culture and even the person. But we have a common denominator in this kind of experiences. Earlier you mentioned the peace, but the common denominator is the incredible feeling of love. You know, a lot of people say, when I experience this out-of-body experience or near-death experience, mm-hmm. I was experiencing the true meaning of love, or this kind. Why is always some love experience, this kind of experience?
Because there is less interpretation than when they're alive, you see, biologically. When they're conscious, you see, there's much less interpretation. So the peace, peace and love. So the peace brings that euphoria, you see. So they come in contact with their relation, their need for relations, you see, but with less psychological interpretation, see. So once they come in contact with their person, they come in contact with programs or tendencies which are natural, which are adjusted to systemic reality. So that's why they live those kind of feeling. See, they're like projected towards others. They're more empathic, etc., because there's less resistance. What makes people suffer from life is the dichotomy between personality and the person. See? So the person has some tendencies, let's say relational needs, and it's interpreted by the personality or the psychological consciousness. So, and there's other natural survival programs and all that. So the problem is the interpretation. So when they're less influenced because they're clinically dead, then because they're projected into their person, that's a question of survival, by the way, and they live, or they are conscious of another way of looking at life. It's normal, because there's less influence from the psychological consciousness, or the information, the emotional charge. We call what people call the personality. It's just because the person identifies with that we call it personality. Okay? The person being ignorant of reality not adjusted to reality. He believes all kinds of things because he was influenced. So once he believes, it's very, consciousness is very powerful. And when the person is not adjusted to systemic reality, that same power goes against him. That's what creates the dichotomy, see, and the suffering. This is the power of consciousness. In that case, unconsciousness, not being conscious of or not being adjusted to systemic reality, or being totally unconscious. A person that is not conscious of the mechanics, the vibrational mechanics of the system, is what we call totally unconscious. See? Psychological consciousness is a partial consciousness. It's not a full consciousness. Once a person awakens to systemic reality, then he begins to create and accumulate real consciousness, total consciousness. That's the shift. What they call about, when they talk about the shift, that's the shift. They shift from psychological consciousness to systemic consciousness. But to be able to shift, a person needs a facilitator, in the sense that by himself, a person is very difficult to go from one consciousness to the other, because it's hermetical. It's hermetic. It defends itself, in other words. There's a lot of resistance. That's what creates suffering, mental suffering, doubts and all that. It's all with the influence of the information that's been accumulating since we were born. Because children are influenced by their parents. If their parents are not awakened, then the infant won't awaken. He will inherit of the consciousness of their parents. That's what people call, when they talk about reincarnation, that's what reincarnates. It's the consciousness of the parents that reincarnates in the child by the reaction of the child and the influence of the parents. See? Because the consciousness or the quality of consciousness of the parent is transferred to the child by his emotional reactions to the emotional reactions of the parents. See the misconception of reincarnation? There is a reincarnation, but not a bodily, in the sense that one personality reincarnates, and it doesn't work like that. It's the consciousness, the quality of the consciousness of the parent that reincarnates in there. Biologically, it's exactly that. It's the genome of the father and the mother that creates the incarnation of the child. So they are reincarnated in the child, physically, biologically. See? So why not psychically? You see? And at the psychic level is the same thing. The child will be very similar in consciousness or the level of consciousness of their parents. Automatically. It's his burden to awaken or to liberate himself from not physical, but psychological suffering and physical suffering. That's what drives people to search for consciousness or a new consciousness or whatever, to liberate themselves from the dichotomy between personality and person, or psychological consciousness. The problem is psychological consciousness. It's a partial consciousness. It's a transitory consciousness from the animal to that psychological consciousness to systemic consciousness. See? So psychological consciousness is the build-up of the mental capacity to develop mental capacity to adjust to systemic reality. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. Can't go from animal to that. You got to develop intellectual or mental capacity. See? Once a person develops sufficient, he's evolved enough, then he can switch or shift to systemic reality. It doesn't happen like that, but it's a process. That's the process that the person lives in the consultations or the interaction with a person that is already awakened. He can guide or help the other person to live the shift. Because there's a lot of traps that stops or retard or hinders the shift.
Is it correct to say that the people who experience this kind of near-death or out-of-body experience, it's like a sample of this kind of shift, like the experience during
yes. Well, it's yes, but totally by himself and totally unconscious. That's why it's so fascinating for these people to talk about it when they live that kind of experience and when they live out-of-body experience. It is in the experience. What is the experience? It's the contact with our person, you see, but relatively separated from personality. Okay? But people who have out-of-body experience, they don't have experience of their person. They don't live a process, a shift. You see? So they interpret in the same way that people that live clinical death interpret their experience. They'll talk about, let's say, I've heard some, they encounter angels and things like that. So where did those concepts come from? They come from the information and the emotional charge of their memories, of the influence of the environment, the collective influence, their parents, whatever. It's like of an inferior consciousness. So even if a person lives out of body experience, he will have contact with this person more than another person, but he will always interpret. So he doesn't form himself. So he touches it, and, but he interprets it.
Himself and the others, because when the people when they come back from this kind of experiences, they say, "Oh yes, I met Jesus," and this is why the contact with someone who already experienced this kind of systemic evolution is so important, because even when you are experiencing the out of body or near-death experience, if you go with your psychological glasses, you will amplify your interpretation.
Of course.
You will amplify your dogma. So,
and people who live out of body experiences, they long to live that kind of experience, because they are very spiritual or esoteric in their approach. See, so what will they see? They'll see what they always they desire to see. You see. So it retards them from living the experience or the process. People who listen to me right now who have lived that kind of out of body experience and interpret it will say, no, it's not right. It's not like that. I know what I lived. I encountered whatever entity in etc. etc. See? But to me, it's always the interpretation, ignorance of reality. So, but it shocks people when we talk like that, because they have beliefs. They don't look at it, observe it in a scientific way. That's the problem. Once a person is liberated enough from his personality or the personal identity to psychological consciousness, he sees reality in a totally different way. So he doesn't interpret, he verifies. I've spoke to at least 3 or 4 people who had clinical death. And I questioned them, and every one of them told me exactly the same thing. So I went from I never lived that kind of experience, but I lived the experience of contact with my person, see? So I've awakened. So I questioned them according to my experience. And everything concords, everything synchronizes. And they realize a little bit at the end of the conversation that it was very similar. I was explaining to them what they are living. How can I do that? I never lived the experience, or that kind of experience. You see? But I lived the experience of awakening, so I know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. They just live the experience, and the experience is forced on them. Person who dies clinically, the experience is forced on them. See? But they always respond in the same way. And it proves. How can I know in advance what they live? You see? By the way I questioned them. Because I know the mechanics, I live the mechanics. See? Being awakened, being adjusted to systemic reality gives you the same peace of mind as a person who is clinically dead. Why? Because there's a distance, there's sufficient distance with the psychological consciousness. Why? Because a person lived a process of contact with this person or with systemic reality is the same thing. So, exact same thing. We're part of the system. Once we are conscious of the mechanics of the system, we start knowing ourselves, knowing what's going on, knowing the mechanics of life. So we don't suffer psychologically anymore. We can't.
It's interesting because again we study the different content regarding near-death experiences or out of body. They are explaining exactly the same thing. Like they are aware, they can understand a lot of things, and when they come back,
Of course.
funny things, they don't want to come back. This is the funny thing too. They say, no, I don't want to come back when they are facing Jesus, Buddha, whatever. But when they come back in their body, they say, oh, I forgot everything when I was in the heaven. I was aware of everything. I was understanding everything.
They remember they were aware of everything, but they don't remember what's going on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a person who's awakened, he doesn't want to come back to psychological consciousness, of course. You know, and he can't anyway. He doesn't want to suffer psychologically, of course. He's not masochist, you know. But it's very interesting, and people always live the same thing. See, the same mechanics, in other words. That's how I know. See, that's how I was able to ask questions towards the same mechanics, and they respond, yes, See? They didn't know where I was going with that, but they responded positively.
Yes, and they don't want to come back. This is why
some, not everybody, but some, yeah.
Yeah. And this is why, unfortunately, we have some people who experience this kind of experience, near-death experience and out of body, after they are kind of using drugs because they are like addicted to this kind of new reality. They want to create the condition of this new reality again.
They don't want to come back. They say they don't want to come back because they don't have the same will. They have less psychological will. And real will is not the same thing. You see? Real will is automatic. There's no effort. So that's why they say, well, I didn't want to come back, because they didn't have the will, psychological will to come back. And usually they say, well, somebody told me, well, it's time to go, you know, go back, you see? It's like a person who has an out-of-body experience. If he stays too long in that state, he doesn't come back, you see? Psychically, whatever. He can be alive, but he will be. And something tells him, you know, to go back. What tells him to go back is survival. See? That's the trigger. That's the automatism.
Why? Why the survival?
Because survival, when you're alive, you're alive. You need to survive. It's automatic. You have a automatism of survival. That's the in life. Survival is crucial at different level. Even the person who's clinically dead, you know, why does he come back? Well, because he's been what they call it, not resuscitated, but the heart started pumping again.
Okay.
So he lives that survival instinct. It's all survival instinct. A person who does out-of-body experience, after a certain time, you'll have that automatic. If he fights that, he can live particular experiences. You know.
And when they come back, a lot of them say that they felt like they were stuck, you know, in the body. You know, like they're not feeling at it at all. They are kind of stuck with their body. We can see this as the kind
what
of
they call the body is actually the psychological body. See, they were stuck in that, of course. See, everybody's stuck in that, in the sense that it's the psychological consciousness or body, what they call it, that hinders for the person to awaken. It stops the person to awaken. You see, it creates a resistance. It's got a mind of its own, in a sense, because of the lack of experience. You see, it's hermetic, so it's very hard to get out of that. So when the person dies or clinically is clean, he doesn't want to come back to that because he has peace compared to that. So he's peaceful compared to that. Psychological consciousness is not peaceful. To have doubts and insecurities all the time is not peaceful. You see? That's the lot of psychological consciousness. Depending on the person, certain people is very intense, less intense for other people, but it's still not comfortable. It's only when a person awakens to systemic reality through a process that he creates his peace. He doesn't have any doubt anymore. He doesn't doubt psychologically. He knows. Once he has the experience, he knows. He integrates. He has integrated that reality. So there's no doubt in that. It's part of his experience. It creates that distance. So, and it creates a distance with his mind, his thoughts, see? Or what he calls his thoughts, or the thinking process, which is automatic. So once he lives that, once he starts observing the automatisms of thoughts, once he realizes it's purely mechanics, then he has that distance. Otherwise, he can't have that distance. It starts with that kind of experience, and there's a process in that. See? And it creates a more and more distance with the personality and the belief in that he thinks, he creates his thoughts. He realized that it's automatic. When a person suffers, he will say once, I can't help it. It's too much. I'm helpless in front of that. If the person is helpless, it means it's automatic. It's not him that creates those thoughts, you see? They're automatically created. It's a machine. Similar to AI, actually. See? It's mechanisms. So once he observes that, once he knows, once he lives or integrates that kind of experience, then it creates that distance. He can't put a value on what's going on in his head. See? Less and less because of that distance. Because he has more and more distance with those mechanisms. That's part of the process.
Yes, more and more distance, thanks to the process and thanks to the fact that the people will accumulate some experiences.
That's what creates the contact with the person. More distance, more contact.
And I think it's important to mention the process because people will think that yes, they can be adjusted to a systemic reality like that in one shot. Because for instance, the near-death experience is a one-shot thing. Like,
yeah.
And a lot of people will say, "Oh, I did my NDA or out-of-body experiences, so I don't need to accumulate a lot of experiences because I have all of those experiences in a one-shot."
Yeah.
And the people like the one-shot. Maybe this is why they will go to drugs, alcohol, because they want to synthesize this kind of...
yeah, that's the anomaly. That's the psychological anomaly. See? Because I understand something, I should be able to do it, or it should happen right away. But life doesn't work like that. See? Even if you understand or you studied something intensively, that doesn't mean you have integrated it. You see, and that's the illusion of education today. Because they go to university, they study, blah blah blah, then they start working, and it's a totally different ball game. They have to integrate, but they're not conscious of that. They integrate slowly, through trials and errors, but they're not really conscious of that. They don't want to be. You see, they're already part of the elite, because they went to university or they learned, they have the knowledge. See, knowledge is not enough. It's integration that counts. Otherwise, it's a total illusion. So, people suffer from that a lot because they want it right away. Elimination. Oh yeah. It doesn't work like that. There's too much resistance. And elimination, or the illusion of elimination, is part of the resistance. That's the ultimate resistance. To what? To the shift. Okay. So people would say, well, I shifted like that because I had a near-death experience or out-of-body experience. It doesn't work like that. They had a certain experience, with their person, etc., but with reality, in other words, but it's always interpreted. That's the problem. Problem is not the experience per se, it's the interpretation of the experience. So.
Yes, because knowledge is not enough, and even experiences is not enough, because you will still interpret through psychological analysis.
Yeah.
And even if you experience NDI or out-of-body experience, if you have still the psychological classes, you will interpret and you will even amplify your interpretation.
Yeah. Depending on your culture, depending on a lot of things, depending on the information that's registered. So.
This is why the contact is so important, because without it, I mean, you can have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experiences.
It's very hard to shift to go from one consciousness, or psychological consciousness, to systemic consciousness. It's a process. So a person needs a facilitator to facilitate the passage, because there's too many traps. There's too much resistance. See? Once a person comes to me for a consultation, there's less resistance. That means the person has listened to the videos and he has realized something, and he's more evolved. There's less resistance, but there's still resistance. You know, it's paradoxal. You know, it's not because the person wants or lives that contact that there's no resistance. He has to realize that the resistance is not conscious. It's part of how he's programmed, how the influence of the psychological consciousness, which is still registered, and the information is very strong. And the person is used to believing or identify to that. That's the problem. So in other words, the process is a process of identification from that psychological consciousness or those concepts, or those the psychological concepts and psychological programs. Same thing. So it's not a question of deprogramming. It's a question of being conscious of the program in real time, to create other programs that are more adjusted to systemic reality.